It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that Burke Ramsey didn't kill JonBenet Ramsey, and it wasn't any sort of misadventure on his behalf that night, whether or not there'd be any other types of misadventure at other times. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that it wasn't someone in his scouting group that murdered JonBenet Ramsey. Now, you might make a case for another son of the Ramseys, namely John Andrew Ramsey. You could make a case saying that JonBenet Ramsey could protect John Andrew Ramsey by, flying him out of Boulder, flying him around all over the place, producing movie ticket stubs, buying off ex-wives and buying the silence of daughters and son-in-laws and things like this because, or maybe not even having to buy it because power control, etc., or, just the closing in of ranks, okay? The public don't have to be the only people who are gaslit either, and on whom smoke and mirrors are used, okay? And certainly to this day, nearly, you are being pushed in all these different directions by somebody. There's a plane left on JonBenet Ramsey's gravestone, for example, a little private plane, a little model of one. I mean, what's that supposed to suggest, right? Oh, because is it about John Ramsey just having his pilots and, his business relating to little planes and things like that? Or is it supposed to relate to John Andrew Ramsey and that night in Boulder and being flown out, in and out, whatever? And, the fact that the plane was then gifted to John Ramsey's pilot, for, years of silence, Well, maybe you're supposed to think all of this, okay? But just because there is a garotte, and by that I do mean the stick, and I don't give a fuck if it's whittled, and I don't give a fuck what it was whittled with, whether it was a kitchen knife, a scouting non-brand pen knife, whether it was a Swiss army knife, whether or not that was bought in Switzerland or not, okay? Or whether Patsy Ramsey would know the difference, okay? What I'm telling you is Burke Ramsey did not murder JonBenet, have anything to do with her death that night, and her parents are not covering for him. They may want you to think he could be guilty and that they are covering for him, and if you are going to keep promoting this, you yourself are actually a monster, okay? You need to stop. Now, okay, sure, maybe another scout, and another scout is the intruder, and whether this is John Andrew Ramsey at 19, 20 years old then, who had probably been in scouts as well, or if it's supposedly someone that is to do with Burke Ramsey's scout group at the time in 1996. I mean, if it isn't Burke or John Andrew, there's no cover-up required, okay? And who would want you to think it's the son, it's this son, it's my wife, it's my neighbour, it's the friend, it's the foreign faction, okay? Who had access to every single thing involved? Every single thing. Who had access? Access to a whittled paintbrush, access to a train track, access to a little girl. Steve Thomas, yes, he may have made quotes with the word scout in it, in letters written, but these are passionate letters, and those quotes have many meanings. there's this list, the list that's just been out recently. Lou Smith, may he rest in peace. His granddaughters and daughter carrying on his work, his holding the flame up to this case on behalf of their granddad and their father, who, is an absolute twit, or he's just corrupt, because he made the decision within a couple of days that JonBenet Ramsey, when he said to Lou Smith, I'm a good Christian man, etc., etc. This is what, Lou Smith just can't believe it. He believes that good Christian men and people that profess to be good Christian men and women, they don't commit crime, they don't commit violent crimes, they don't commit sexual crimes. Would you give me a goddamn break? Now, I just don't want to keep getting myself tied up in knots. And yes, Steve Thomas does keep saying in his letters, we have our hands tied, we were bound for this, that, the other. Okay, what you need to decide is, and I'm not going to tell you, well, look, maybe I'll give you my opinions later, but, I'm always, what I'm saying on this channel, the Humanimal channel, it's starting conversations, it's giving points of views, and it's a certain way of looking at things, okay? Now, what you've got to decide is, was this premeditated? Was a crime going to be committed, but was it going to be murder? So think about what might point in one way or the other. And think about who else might be in collusion, or who else might be victims, who else might just be caught up in something, and then forevermore that's how their life went. I am not saying that nearly 10-year-old boys don't commit violent crime, sexual crimes, and murders. And I've spoken about this already with regards to my point of view about this murder case. They certainly do, okay? They certainly do. They commit violent acts which aren't intentionally murder, but they do commit manslaughter and murder. They do things intentionally to harm. They intentionally sexually abuse and violate. And then they are victims of their own youth and stupidity, and they do things without much thought, and accidents happen. And, strange scenarios might come about. So, this is something you've got to think through too. Like, okay, if this was an accident, is this really anything to do with Burke and discovering Christmas presents, JonBenet, mucking around with Christmas presents in the basement that weren't meant for her but were meant for the other Ramsey children, Burke not liking something that JonBenet did, and no, it's not, stealing some effing pineapple out of a bowl. Did she mess with his trains? Did she just get in his way? Was he jealous because of a bicycle? And, this sort of thing. Because, children, just like animals, have a really powerful sense of fairness. It's as we mature and get older that we get to understand that, okay, someone can have 5 presents, I can get 4. And in some sort of a learning disabled mind might struggle with certain concepts. If they're slower to learn various things in life, they could be slow to develop intellectually and emotionally and have this sense of maturity. Many children are quite immature sometimes at 9 or 10, and many are worldly beyond their years and just have more of an innate understanding of things. And whether this has been through, guidance and teaching of their parents, or, by being neglected of this part of their upbringing or not, who's to say? All of these scenarios are perfectly possible. There are so many possible scenarios. Okay, do you think any of these scenarios were in the 30,000 page discovery put toward the grand jury? Do you believe it when Alex Hunter later will say, look, I was trying to get things happening, and no, he was absolutely obstructive. He's constantly making sure that police just can't go ahead and do interviews and perform tasks. Everything has to be run by the damn Ramseys. Why are the Ramseys protected? Are you trying to tell me Alex Hunter was just trying to protect a wealthy, important person's little boy or oldest son? The Alex Hunter that was notorious for not trying cases, who has a reluctance to put people away, particularly people who have committed certain types of crimes. It is just sickening. It is just sickening. I just think people are monsters who want to manipulate your thoughts and drag you along with them on just some merry dance. They don't have a fucking clue, but they're happy to make the public think that maybe they think a young child did this crime and it was covered up in the way it was, and that all the bullshit and jelly beans that has gone on around this case then up until now is all to do with protecting a little boy or a young man. You've got to think about access. These things were there and they were used, and were they used purposefully, with a lot of thought? Is this something that was in the family and that a family shared? But who is really to blame here? Okay, who is to blame for JonBenet's death? Who talks about his own suffering and not his daughter's? Who was protected by the justice system, which is kind of a contradiction in terms, isn't it? Justice system. When you think about the Ramsey case, this little girl, JonBenet Ramsey, was abandoned. And when you go along with all of the shit to do with the case, rather than just going for the jugular and demanding justice, the right justice, which is the right person, it's not too late. It is not too late to make an arrest and to have someone openly charged and in the court of public opinion properly named and having to own up to being the perpetrator in this case. I mean, people just need to fucking stop it, okay? There would have been so many items around that house whittled by Burke Ramsey, left all over the place, okay? Look, I don't think it's right that John Andrew Ramsey shared a wing of a home with this little girl. It is completely unsafe for her privacy, her dignity, and just her development to be so available. You know, a bedroom's a very private, intimate place. It should have been nearer the parents' wing, but they built themselves a wing above and then chose who went in these bedrooms, and they didn't put Burke next to JonBenet, even though John Andrew wasn't going to be home all the time. I mean, when they moved into that home, he was a mid-teen, and he was next to a young girl who started exhibiting signs of sexual assault 3 and a bit years before her death. And she certainly wasn't protected. You know, no matter what the police were thinking, okay, you know, they wanted to arrest the Ramseys for child neglect and for allowing abuse to happen and allowing this murder to happen, okay? And they wanted to convict both John and Patsy, and people wrongly state that Burke was a suspect. And then perhaps, you know, he was cleared. Just like the Ramseys were suspects and then they were cleared. Guess what? Burke was always a witness. A witness. 30,000 pages of discovery. We all are fascinated with 2,000 pages of discovery in the Christopher Watts, Shanann Ruzek family's case, okay? Imagine 30,000 pages. And they were hamstrung and hobbled at every turn by the DA's office. And they were not exonerated, no matter how many sick fuck interviewers like people on The View or Oprah, etc., would like to tell you. They're telling you how to think. The Ramseys are exonerated. They don't give a shit what the truth is. They maybe even do, but they're kind of on board with it. But they just want the ratings. They want the views. They want the advertising dollar that this brings. They don't care what they're saying. To say that the Ramseys are exonerated is complete bullshit. Okay? And they are suspects to this day. And, you know, whether it's just, you want to say, okay, well, this is just for neglect, though. This is just for allowing such a heinous thing to happen to their little girl. You know, as I was saying before, you know, okay, so Burke, okay, so he accidentally smacked her on the head. Okay, sure. So, and then he's gone and put this garotte tied in this scout knot tool with very simple knots, I might add. I mean, any old housewife could tie them. And then he's gone and dragged JonBenet, you know, to try and hide her in the cellar. He's dragged her like that because he wouldn't just pick her up with his arms. He's thinking, Boy Scout, because he's just so delusional, or because he's such a little sociopath. He had no feeling at all for his little sister, to whom he was actually quite close. No, he doesn't think of just moving her by holding her arms. No, he thinks he's going to do the scout thing, the rescue thing, and drag her. Well, I'm sorry, but the autopsy doesn't show that type of damage on her throat. She was being pulled up from the back like that, right? And it doesn't explain, well, someone's put these pathetic little things here. Maybe they wanted to display her somehow. I don't know, but did Burke want to display her like that? I mean, come on, think a fucking again. And when you are just making up this nonsense just to pull public along with you, you're a freaking monster, okay? Okay, you are. And sorry, this isn't very good. It's not really how I wanted to say it, what I wanted to say, but I'm very angry. You know, there has been no justice for JonBenet Ramsey. And while the bullshit goes on from surviving family members and by people that like to talk about the case, while they are talking about it in such a way that doesn't demand justice, we're diminishing ourselves. We diminish ourselves as human beings and as a society when we carry on with this bullshit. When we say that this bullshit is okay, and this bullshit is okay for entertainment purposes, for views, for clicks, for likes, for Patreon, for a news show, for a TV special, for a podcast, for a book, okay? We are demeaning and diminishing ourselves as human beings. We are debasing our own morality and our own journey through the universe to get to the point in time where we do have this constantly growing and developing, where we have an understanding of psychology, of how people are created, how things happen and occur, why people do the things they do, and what is involved in, their personal interactions, their environment. We didn't used to know a lot about psychology, say at the turn of the century, and but it's something that is developing extremely fast, just like our other scientific knowledge. And we are becoming better at understanding the human race. And when we have the refusal to stand up and demand real justice for a little girl who died a terrifying, painful, humiliating, devastating, disturbing death in her own home, where certain items were used that someone had access to, and the goddamn desire to use them, then we are regressing. We are letting ourselves down, because we know now what human beings are capable of. We know how people hide in plain sight. We know that facades and smoke and mirrors are a very big part of the show that we are watching. We know this. We know not to be shocked any longer by who can do what. Okay, so sure, we are also seeing, that scum do scumbag acts, and we can pretty much pick them out, and we know that damaged people and and people that are living obviously with huge psychological damage and with all the trappings that come with that into their lives. We know that they are committing terrible crimes, whether they are 10 years old or 19 or 39 or 49, seeing some numbers here. We know this, right? And yet, where are we backing ourselves? Who are we backing? What are we willing to put on the line, as a human race, as a society, when we are still saying, well, that's all right, let's just have people in power and let them make or not make the tough decisions And meanwhile, we'll write books. We'll write books. We might resign from cases, or we might, whatever it is. But we won't just come right out and demand justice because we know the truth and we all know it. We're going to profit from it, or we're going to hide from it, or we're going to help it hide, or we're going to help it profit. And we're all going to be involved. We're all going to be part of the lack of justice for JonBenet Ramsey and other little children and other victims in general, because we're not going to we're just not strong enough. We just don't want to go there. Makes us uncomfortable, and we're going to second guess ourselves, and we're going to let people second guess ourselves. We're going to let people plant ideas in our heads that we don't have the ability or the knowledge or the time to follow through and work out for ourselves, that it's just bullshit. We're going to get carried away going down other little yellow brick roads. We're going to let people shake the snow globe and dictate where the snow falls, so that things within the snow globe are buried and hidden and confused and violated and degraded and disguised, and just then we can just ignore it, and no one has to really do anything that pushes them, makes them uncomfortable, or scares them in any way. Just saying.